Welcome to Fear Less, Do More. Coming up on today's episode, we're joined by David Burdus, an inclusive design consultant, co-producer and paratrike enthusiast.
Back in the day, if I wanted to go anywhere, for example, I would get carried into pubs up flights of stairs. Not so bad when you're going in, start at night, coming out when people are a bit drunk. I generally tend to adapt. I don't get too upset these days. I used to be an angry young man, but now it's more about helping put things right. A lot of what I do is just getting people to say, let's just talk to a few people, see if we can find little bits of gold dust. Things are a little bit different, not rely on our own thinking. Reminds me of a story, actually. We need to look for people with lived experience, with a different perspective, so that we can make a difference. And that's what inclusive thinking is. That's all it is, really. A friend of mine rang me up and said, "Oh, you've got these trikes. You drive them from the wheelchair." And I thought, naff off, I'm not doing that. Let's drive from my chair. And I was putting the phone down, it was like, BMW 1200. And I went, BMW 1200. I was going to go out with my grandson on the trike, put the trike in the back garden, ticking over, and literally I just ran in to get my helmet, and my wife was screaming, "The trike's on fire, the trike's on fire." And I was thinking, what? But I'll tell you about something I would like to do, and that is get rid of the steps to number 10 Downing Street. That will be my most standout moment. If there's something I would like to achieve, my bucket listing, that would be it, is to get rid of those sodden steps.
Hi David, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm really delighted to be here.
You were recommended as somebody that we should be talking to who really embodies fearlessness. A mutual friend and a former guest on the podcast, John Holmes, and he said that you've got to talk. If you want to talk about fearless and you want about somebody doing more, you've got to talk to David because he's got an incredible story. But that incredible story starts with something that was pretty devastating for you when you had your accident.
Oh, cracky, yes. It's probably why I behave and act the way I am today, because many moons ago, I was 21 years old, and probably say, blue-eyed boy, educated, having a whale of a time, just finished university, had my motorbike, managing a real ale-off licence in Jasmine called Legendary Yorkshire Heroes.
Oh, yes, well,
Fantastic.
I remember that, yeah.
There's another guy, Tony Brooks. And in Spinal, I had an argument with a roundabout, and I sustained a spinal injury. So that was quite interesting. So severed my spinal cord, fractured, crazy paved, 5 vertebrae, 10 months in hospital, a few operations, rods in, rods out, and then I was released back into the world in 1983-4.
Wow, and I bet the world was pretty different then.
It was interesting.
Yes.
It was interesting. Back in the day, because there was no civil rights for disabled people. And of course, it was a bit of a birth by fire, because I was used to doing what the hell I wanted, whenever I wanted. I didn't have to ask anybody. And suddenly, it's really weird because you're completely disempowered. Everyone else makes decisions for you. For example, bouncers not letting me into nightclubs because said I was a fire hazard. I go back the next day with a box of matches and a can of petrol. Needing doctors' certificates to do things like parachute jumps, but simple things like not being able to get on transport, not being able to be offered a job. I thought, right, I want to do something, so I thought I'll get into financial management. So I applied to all the banks at the time, and I'll name one particularly, which is NatWest, said, no, you couldn't possibly come on a management course because none of our high street offices or branches are accessible. And that's how it was back in the day. It was quite interesting.
I think people forget that, the Equalities Act didn't come in until 2010.
Yeah, I mean, the actual physical side of it, physical features was 2004. So policy practice procedure 1999. So people were a little bit scared and they started to do things, but it's gone a bit off the boil. But I'm old school. I mean, I'll help people put things right. I tend not to flag wave and chain myself to railings. Because, back in the day, if I wanted to go anywhere, for example, I would get carried into pubs up flights of stairs. Not so bad when you're going in, start at night, coming out when people are a bit drunk. peeing in gutters and car parks and stuff like that. Yeah, I generally tend to adapt. I don't get too upset these days. I used to be an angry young man, but now it's more about helping put things right.
Yeah.
Still a long way to go.
And you've sort of used that experience in a positive way to try and help other people, is what you said. So you've now got a business that supports other businesses and individuals who are trying to improve accessibility. Why is that all from your personal experience? Is that what you're drawing on there?
That was the kind of the shock initially to think things are very different. And I say, well, I used to be pretty cross about it. So, but then I realised that the way to make change is to work with people again and persuade and educate and put a bit of pressure on them. But certainly the thing is, when people aren't really appreciative of a situation, they don't necessarily have a first clue. So that's a bit strong, isn't it, of how to come up with a solution. So it started off with my own experience. But then I quickly got more into learning. And it's not just about what I know, because it has to mesh with mainstream. So when I started to have a better impact, it was when I started to work with other people. So I worked at Gateshead, Libraries and Arts, in the access to information and reading services. So that was more about the visual side and the neurodiverse side. Then I ended up working with South Tyneside, Metropolitan Borough Council, South Tyneside Council, as their first access and disability policy officer. And again, it's not about just doing what I say, it's because you've got to make it work. So say meshing with the systems and the processes and the kind of statute and the legal side of it, that's what makes a difference. So it's a blend. It was like a cross-fertilization of, people learn from me, but I learn from them. And that's why I'm more effective now, is because when you've got to make change, it's got to fit within the system. And so that's what I tend to do now. So I work with policymakers, strategy deliverers, or physical built environment shapers to make change. I mean, that's the core, but I much prefer working in other areas, like sport and through the media, because that's where you can have a huge impact. So which I love doing stuff like this. Where's all the cameras? This is fantastic.
So you've done a bit of TV stuff as well.
Yeah, I fell into that through the disability side of things as well, because I quickly found that people might frown on it, but if you did things in a certain way, so it was, I teamed up with a guy called Alan Matthews, and we were raising a lot of money and doing exciting stuff. And it was a bit of, dynamic duo, Batman and Robin. It was the disabled Dave, and it's but what I quickly found is if you wanted some profile and if you wanted to get things done and draw people in, you could use the media, the newspapers and the TV. So we did that. So, climbing the Tyne Bridge with Chris Bonington, doing a parachute jump, and then got into, quite nicely, did a bit of anchoring and presentation for Channel 4 First Disability Programme, Same Difference. So that was quite good. And then moved on to, they had another programme called The Great Outdoors, not the up-to-date Great Outdoors, but this was literally going out and exploring. And again, so it would be a sailing across the channel, or it would be sea kayaking to the Isle of Jura, or it would be skydiving, or it might be a kite festival.
All very calm things to do, skydiving.
What was great is we shifted, and it was done by John Gale Productions at the time and for Channel 4. And what was nice about that is it wasn't about, oh, isn't he brave? No, it was completely incidental. So I was one of a number of presenters who just happened to be doing stuff, and at no point was it made a fuss about, which I loved. And that, I think, is that kind of incidental representation is a great way of, if you put images or put stuff in front of people, they become more relaxed and more used to it.
Absolutely.
So that was good.
Yeah. So so that in that respect, you have broken a lot of molds in terms of just demonstrating that disabled people are just people who do things.
And it's the same for all marginalised groups, people's protected characteristics. That kind of just if you see it, it's much easier to make it mainstream. Where now, so when I first used to go out and about in the streets of Newcastle, way back when the metro came about, metro was great. Suddenly there's wheelchair users and buggies everywhere, and they never used to be. So one time you go in the metro and people be staring at you, and kids literally kids throwing stones at me and stuff like this. So, but now it's so much better, so much better.
We're still a long way to go in terms of the space accessibility. Still lots to do.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, I don't know if you can see me in my chair now. The whole chair is quite small. This is my manual chair. I've got a powered chair. We were talking about a friend you have with a chair, and so people have got their heads around this type of chair. Powered chair, completely different. That kind of space and scooters, massive change, and even the space. So it's a bit analytical, but the space required to turn the power chair around, according to the British standard, it's actually bigger than the minimum standard, statutory standard for an accessible toilet. So we're putting toilets in, going, yeah, tick box, fantastic, and power chair user can't get in there with knocking the sink and the toilet off the wall. So there's that kind of understanding, and that's the difference between access and inclusion. So we've got standards. But we need to go to user-centric. We need to go people-based, and that's what makes the difference. And that I mean, it's the same for a power chair user. It's the same for women in the workplace. It's the same for neurodiversity, and that's why it's important to talk to people, find out, not rely on our own bias, and make the change. And that's a lot of what I do is just getting people to say, let's just talk to a few people, see if we can find little bits of gold dust. Things are a little bit different, not rely on our own thinking. Reminds me of a story, actually. Can I tell it?
Of course you can.
It's an old one. You might have heard of it. It's the World War II bomber bullet hole story. Anyway, way back, Bomber Command, we were getting a bit concerned because, quite rightly, a lot of the bombers that were coming back, I think it could have been, we were losing a lot of people. And I think at one point, some of the trips, there was only like 10% coming back. So Bomber Command said, well, we need to do something about this. So they instructed whoever it was to analyse all the planes. And they said, right, find out where the bullet holes are, because we're going to armour up and protect our people. But you can't armour the whole plane. That's a tank. It won't take off. So they they analysed the plane. They drew up a template. And so there were all the bullet holes in the wings, in the fuselage. And they're right, armour up. When a Jewish statistician said, hang on a minute, you're not looking at the planes that didn't come home. You're looking at the planes that came back. It's the ones that didn't make it. That's where we need to see where the bullet holes were. And so guess where the bullet holes were? Absolutely. Not in the fuselage, not in the wings. They were in the cockpit. They were in the engines, and actually quite a lot around the tail gunner. So that's where they tried to, and that apparently made a huge difference. But the important thing there is because people were relying on their own bias and their own understanding. It was like, talk to other people, talk to people with a life experience, and that's what makes the difference. And that's exactly that's just a great principle that I've adopted is we need to look for people with lived experience, with a different perspective, so that we can make a difference. And that's what inclusive thinking is. That's what it is really. And of course, think differently. Mutant thinking.
Mutant thinking, I like
yeah,
that.
like Xavier, Professor Xavier, he was like, he connected like with thousands of people, didn't he?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. I'm vice chair at Disability North, and I think the thing with disability, why people struggle with it even more to understand, is because it's so broad. People who have life-limiting injuries. Yeah. There are people who have neurodiverse conditions. There are people with other health conditions, and I think people sometimes are a bit outfaced by that and a bit like, whoa, well, how do I accommodate all of these people? But as you say, if you talk to those people, they're the ones that know best what they need to be able to accommodate, and will be receptive to those discussions rather than just having decisions made on presumptions about what might work for them, or just being ignored and thought, oh, we can't go there because that's too difficult.
I mean, the design industry particularly now is moving on a lot. I mean, the Royal Institute of British Architects have now got an inclusive design overlay, which tells the whole team and client what to do at different stages, which is really nice. And even some of the clients I'm working for now, small to large, I'll mention one particularly, which is the FCDO, who are taking a great approach to inclusivity, and they're really, really trying hard, and they're doing really good equality impact assessments high up and talking to their staff, not right the way through. And I used to be a bit iffy about neurodiversity, thinking, oh, they're coming in stealing thunder, all the physical access needs to be done. But then you start to realise, like within family and friends, we've got quite a range of people, and actually, the work around design for the mind, that absolutely isn't narrowband. That applies to everybody, absolutely everybody, in the way our brains work. And if we want people to work efficiently in the workplace, we really need to get our heads around stuff like lighting and temperature and colour and noise and distraction and all that kind of stuff.
And things obviously have changed very much from when in the 80s, when your first experience of being a disabled person in a very ableist world, to now. But do you think that change has happened because policy changed and the law changed and it forced people to take action, or do you think there's been a societal shift around inclusion?
The shift definitely came. That move came around from the 70s and the disability movement, the British Council of Organisations of Disabled People, because it was bad. I mean, when you think historically, a little bit of education and social modelling. I mean, we had the eugenicist movement way back in the early 1900s, and we think Hitler was bad, but Churchill was a eugenicist. And in the 1930s, like 33, under the education arrangements, we were taking kids born with a little bit of a hip displacement. We were taking them from their families, sticking them in institutions where they'd spend their lives, horribly abused. And at 1933, we were doing that to people. So, that has been, and I won't spend any more time going into other examples, but it was really bad. And certainly I was aware of how bad it was when I came out of hospital. But it was the 70s when people had had enough, and they were chaining themselves, and so that made a difference. And it gradually took a while for the policy to come in. So it wasn't until 1995 it started, and that made a difference. I was working for South Tyneside 1988, but you all have some very open-minded people, but you have what I call institutionalised inertia. And the discrimination was horrendous back then. And even on a parallel level, I remember building control, going in there, and I remember a 16-year-old girl who was a trainee coming into building control, and there were all the Pirelli calendars up with boobs hanging out and stuff like this. I couldn't believe it. That was one of the things that I got. Well, we had to write a report to committee to make them take those things down. But so you'll relate to that. But it was the same across the board, and I think the Equality Committee then was me and a gay guy, a lesbian, but they weren't officially out, but they just happened to, it just wasn't discussed. There was nothing going on. But the discrimination side of it was huge. I mean, you literally, from my perspective, couldn't get work, not allowed to go in places. You couldn't get involved in your kids' education. You couldn't get an education. The legislative side of it made a huge change, and that kind of focus, and that kind of give it a prod. Since then, it has died down a bit, I think. And the biggest problem we've got around the legislation is if you want to do anything as an individual, or we were talking earlier about as a tenant, is that you're on your own, really. You don't really get the support and backup. We definitely need like a government agency who will help take you to task. Like in America, they do it. They don't do that here. And it's such a shame, because that's kind of held things back. And a lot of corporations, and shoot me down, this is where, what is it, Fear less, do more. Fear less, do more. I've got fear less, open my mouth. I can't help myself. And a lot of the way some of the bigger corporates do with it now, if they get confronted, is deflect. End of the day, shove them $3,000 or to $5,000, and it's done. And I've seen that so many times. I was a bit negative, saying, but I'll still help you put things right.
So, one of the things you said was when you first had your accident, you came out of hospital, and some of your frustrations around things that you couldn't do because you were a disabled person. And one of the things that you said there was, you had to get a doctor's note to do a parachute jump. That to me indicates that you might be a bit of an adrenaline junkie. Yeah,
always have been.
And I know that now one of the things that you got involved with is paratriking, and that's become a real passion.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know what a paratrike is, can you sort of explain what that is?
I should have brought a huge photograph. Yeah, it's
Fear Less, Do More is brought to you by the team at Square One Law. If you're enjoying this episode, hit follow or subscribe. It really helps us out, and it means that you won't miss out on any future episodes. We have some great fearless guests that leave you feeling really inspired. And if you think someone else would enjoy it too, feel free to pass it on, whether that's a mate, a colleague, or someone in your network. Thanks for listening. Now back to the conversation.
So for people who don't know what a paratrike is, can you sort of explain
what
that is?
I should have brought a huge photograph. Yeah, it's a lot of people who've had accidents or can't drive for various reasons, maybe onset of arthritis and stuff like that. So adapt motorcycles, tried to make them work. But there's a specific type of trike that was built in the 2007 onwards, called a Martin Conquest, and it's a BMW front end. Okay, so you buy a BMW, cut it in half, throw the back end away. So you've got your BMW. Stick a drive shaft in, because BMWs are shaft driven. Put a differential with 2 wheels on the back. So you've got a trike now, you've got 1 wheel, 2 wheels. So then you put a ramp at the back, and you put linear actuators, that's like rods that will like pull the ramp up. Put a platform in, so now I can drive up the ramp in the platform, put an electronic lock in, so I'm locked in place. Then you put a beautifully crafted carbon fibre skin on it, so it looks like amazing, a bit like Judge Dredd meets Batman. And you've now got this monster 1200 BMW driven trike, and it's got Clicktronic gear change, because I can't use the clutch, so I've got an electronic clutch. And basically, woof, you're away in that. And I heard about those in about 2007. A friend of mine rang me up and said, "Oh, you've got these trikes. You drive them from the wheelchair." And I thought, "Naff off! I'm not doing that. Let's drive from my chair." And I was putting the phone down. It was like BMW 1200, and I went, BMW 1200. So I had a look up. Oh, bloody hell! 2 weeks later, I had a test drive. Couldn't quite afford one, but then I was doing promotional driving. We drove to Berlin with a company with 2 guys, 2 ex-policemen from Scotland. And it's just, because what people will know, if you ride a bike, I'm tempted to keep looking at cameras, but if you drive a bike, you know what I'm talking about. you kind of, live to ride, ride to live, and it's not what you drive, it's that you drive. And but did you see that? I nearly got emotional. That's how it is. And when I had my accident, Spinal, kind of woke up and you think, that's it, game over. Because I really did a good job. It was the worst spinal injury they'd seen, apparently. And it was, so that was 83, 4, 5, 6, 7, well, a lot of years later. Then I had the opportunity to get, and it was just amazing, because you don't have to wear a helmet, and when the sun's shining, you can get out there. Yeah. It's just superb. Especially, you can go out riding with other people. Even if I just go to Tesco's, to get it's fantastic. And of course, they're just, apart from that, because I am an adrenaline junkie, and when we went to Germany, I was on the Autobahn, so took this Conquest. Before I get there, the Martin Conquest was made and built by a guy whose son had a spinal injury. I think it was skiing, that's how the story goes. But he wanted to give him the experience, so that Alan Martin he was called, so hence the Martin Conquest. And
that's the name of the
that's the motorcycle. Yeah,
right, okay.
Yeah. I just refer to them as Conquests. But there we go. So there I was in Germany riding as part of I'm trying to remember what the initiative was called. It was something like Globe Moto. These 2 Scottish ex-coppers were going to travel around the world. Capability Scotland rang me and said, do you fancy riding from Scotland to London? And I went, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And then I met the guys and they said, why don't you come down to the ferry? Okay. Then it was, why don't you come across the water? Okay. And then it was, why don't you come to Berlin? And I go, why don't we stop? But when we're in Berlin, I thought, right, I'm going to give this a go, because I hadn't really opened one up. Autobahn, bearing in mind it was raining as well, 125 miles an hour. And which was, but at that point I started to, if I'm fair, I thought, started to get a little bit anxious, because I thought, bloody hell, it's wet, and the rain on the visor and all that kind of thing. And what you think, you really don't pull out into the fast lane unless you're overtaking. When you finish, you get in, from a motorcycling point of view, because things just come up your butt so fast. It's unbelievable. So in and you're out. But that was an incredible experience, going to Germany, especially with those 2 guys. I took so much abuse, so much racist abuse off those 2 Scottish guys. And when I arrived, I had a St George neckerchief type of thing, And they gave me, and they were going, get that off. You're not riding that. Come on. I said, don't push me. And so they kept up. So when I arrived for the trip, I had a St. George helmet, the whole thing, type of thing. That was it. So there you go.
So you've done all of these things that normal people like me would think, oh, parachute jump, or riding at 120 miles an hour around down the autobahn. Do you ever feel fear when you do that?
Well, I don't know if it's fear. It's a wild kind of. It must be what the adrenaline does to you. Well, I suppose yes. The parachute jump. I did my first parachute jump at Sunderland with a mate of mine, Paul Dids, and we were 19 at university. We went to Sunderland. So I don't directly answer your question, do I? Okay. And so we both went. We didn't tell anyone, and we were told, right, you're going to go up now. Don't have anything to eat. So we went and had 2 sausage sandwiches, and it was get in the plane. And that was incredible because it was a static line, and you had to. It was a little Cessna thing with it. You had to climb out the side, get and hang on to the wing and let go. And so I was absolutely shitting myself, and. But you're so. It's a mix, and I love that kind of thing. And I remember, the guy, because he told us later, we were a little bit far before I put you out. And when he put us out, I remember it's the A19 in Sunderland, and I'm coming down. Bearing in mind it's the circular parachute and it's the toggles, so you've got a 5 mile an hour forward speed. So if it's 5 mile an hour wind coming this way, you go straight down. But anyway, I was blown over the A19, and I was going straight along the A19 like this, so I could see cars coming this way, and I've got cars coming between my legs, and I'm like pulling on this toggle. So I'm trying to get over, and literally I remember this car came, and I couldn't have been, I don't know, I don't know how it was, probably higher, but to me it was like 20, 30 feet above the A19, and I remember the car and the back window and these 2 little kids with their faces like this. And I thought, well, I don't know. I'm thinking, I'm dead here. But I managed to just miss the A19, just missed this like dike thing, just missed the fence and drop into a field. And I had to wrap my chute up, climb across the A19, and no one missed me. And I came back, and I didn't even know I wasn't there. But the fear side of it. And when I did my jump with a instructor, when I did my free fall. Yeah, I do remember, and I was doing that with Channel 4, and I do remember hanging out the sun. When you're hanging there, all that goes through your head is, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And then you think, it won't hurt. It won't hurt. But once you're out, it's just phenomenal. It's the best thing ever. And that 126 mile an hour, nearly like the trike, 126, I think it is, terminal velocity, and with the drogue chute opening going down. And then when it opens, it's so serene. And it's a bit like when I climbed Ben Nevis and I was up there. I say if you're religious, it's the closest thing to being next to God, I think. It's like this, listen. That's what it's like. It's just amazing. Yeah.
Amazing stories. It sounds like you've had a few lucky escapes. So, your accident to start off with, you nearly landed on the A19, and then I hear there was an incident relatively recently.
I don't have cat lives, I have bike lives, basically. Yeah. So, came off on an oil slick in Stockton, did the Spinal thing, and did this. And then, in November, I was so lucky because I was going to go out with my grandson on the trike, put the trike in the back garden, ticking over, and literally I just ran in to get my helmet, and my wife was screaming, the trike's on fire, and I was thinking, what? And it took me I was upstairs in my office because in about a minute to get up, a minute to get down, so it was only 2 minutes, and I'm not kidding. Well, if you see stuff on the news like Beirut, it was an absolute fireball, so it must have been fuel, it must have been electrical, it must have been some heat. But you could see it from the A69 4 miles away, like the black plumes. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh, that's gone. Like, that is definitely gone. But then, and people, you must be upset. And I was gutted. I was absolutely gutted. That's my trike gone. So that's it. I'm done again. However, I was delighted, really, because I thought, wow, could have been in that. Yeah. And the thing, if I was in it when it went, it's got the electric thing at the back. That takes quite a few seconds to get down. Mm. I got your E-lock, which you've got to get out, and then so what would I have done? Like thrown myself over the side? Would I think bits would have been broken, and I probably would have been a bit burnt.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it went up like a torch. So I'm really happy it's gone. And not only that, because I didn't think insurance would pay out, but they paid out, and I got a couple of grand, very kind. Some people who are actually listening probably helped out. So I was able to get a new trike, get it shipped over. It's not road legal yet because I need to register it. They're like hen's teeth. You can't find them. So I really didn't think I would get one, because they only made about 20 in this country. The Americans made them under license, probably 30, 40. And bear in mind, they're all like 16, 17, 18 years old, and bits are dropping off them. And the only way you get one, literally the only way you get one of these trikes, is if somebody dies. So a friend of mine who's got one, I was aware of someone who died. And so I really thought, I can't get one. But a guy who was acquainted with me on Facebook got in touch. He's a Spanish guy, but his nickname's Pilau, he's a Spanish guy. And he got in touch, went, I got a trike for sale. I went, are you selling your trike? He went, no. A friend of mine died. So it's like, But so I've got this guy's trike. So I'll be riding. I'll take his spirit with me when I'm out there on the road. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a nice way to look at it, isn't it? He's carrying that on, because somebody's obviously so passionate as well.
But the whole thing about the way it is, I suppose, the story of my life, everything is Chumbawamba. I get knocked down, but I get up again. Yes. And I had that on the back of my trike. I get knocked down, but I get up again. So that soundtrack is my theme tune.
So out of all of the things that you've done, climbing Ben Nevis, parachute jumping, paratriking, what's the sort of standout moment for you? What do you think, if there was only one thing I could do again, what would you do?
Apart from meet my wife and go all over it again.
Oh.
My wife, Janet. So many interesting things. I mean, there's the adrenaline type stuff, and I'm trying to do something a bit more poignant. But I'll tell you about something I would like to do, and that is get rid of the steps to number 10 Downing Street. That will be my most standout moment. If there's something I would like to achieve, my bucket listing, that would be it, is to get rid of those sodding steps. And it can be done quite easily just by amending the external infrastructure, really, get rid of the steps. Because if I said to people, how many steps into Downing Street, road to curb to step to inn, would they know? But it's such a bloody we don't give a damn image that goes out on the news at 10 every bloody day nearly. And I had an experience in 1994 when I was England's Young Business Achiever. Never guessed, would you? And it was a world competition, because it was the World Young Business Achiever. Didn't win, unfortunately, but there was 9 other competitors from around the world. So we got to go to Downing Street. We were in an inaccessible bus. I get carried off in the berthing position by 2 guys, but I was first at the door in the chair like this. So I get to the door, and I'm just about to pop up and pull myself through the door, and this rather nattily dressed young male civil servant with his pointy brogues. That's what I remember. The image I remember, these pointy brogues, going, if you wait, we'll get the temporary ramp. And I went, what? I'm here. No. You. So I had to wait. All my the rest of the party filed in, and they were absolutely mortified. Especially the woman from Australia. Their legislation was a little bit ahead of ours at the time. So by the time I got in, and all I'm looking at everyone's bottoms. But I did get to sit next to John Major. Had the chat. 1994. And I thought, here we go, we can do something. But all these years later, 6 or 7 or 8 prime ministers, various ministers for disabled people, trying to get that sorted. You've no idea. So that institutionalised inertia. And shields up back in the day at the Cabinet Office for whole heritage, and you can't mess with this. And the door's not the real door. The door's a bomb-proof thing. The real door's in the Churchill Museum. And really, so I've got a world-class landscape architect on stream, good PR guy on stream. We've got a proposal done. But bearing in mind, I've been in communication with lots of different prime ministers. But it's time that happened, because it's, you know, the messaging that it's putting out at the moment is not clever.
Yeah, it's a symbolism,
and it can be done. And I know I dribble on, but the thing is, historically, steps, aren't we great? Aren't we powerful? And let's keep people out. Steps, because they're just not a practical way of getting around things. Anyway, don't get me. I'll stop that. But yeah, that's what I want to do. Number 10, that would be great. And I want to be the first person up that. Not even a ramp, it could be level access.
Yeah, it just doesn't compute how that is not a thing already. And you know, what I always think around accessibility, not just from a disability point of view, but from a general inclusion point of view, is generally it will benefit everybody. So having a ramp into number 10 is not going to disadvantage anybody, but it is going to include other people who might
set
have
an example as well. Set a good example as well. And I mean, the thing about the inclusion side is they don't really do a lot of financial analysis of the benefit and so if you think about, even if we had the concept of step 3 around the entire country, the impact that would have on the health service budgets would be phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, for the injuries, and especially like on steps and in housing and stuff like that. So I think people really need to take a look at it in that.
They need some more mutant thinking.
Mutant thinking, yes, that's what we are. That's what we are, exactly. That's what I like.
So what, apart from getting a step-free nation, what would you like to see happening over the next few years? What would be success for you? For
me, complete change of direction, because I need an exit strategy from all this. Probably partly down to my divorce and pension situation. So I'm never going to stop working. Well, I don't mind because it's fun, but a change in direction. So I'm just going to plug in here. I've just now co-producer for the Whiskey Chasers. So that's where I want to go with that, because I do love whiskey. When I climbed Ben Nevis, 2000 and whatever, 8, 9, got introduced in a whiskey shop. They said, try this. I said, don't like whiskey. Tried it when I was younger. White Horse. I see outside to open my mouth again. But they said, try it. Oh, you don't, try this Auchentoshan, which is Gaelic or whatever, for corner of the field, triple distilled. Oh, beautiful. Then I got into the whiskey, and ever since then I got more and more into it. And I had an idea with the trike, a bit like the single Cherry Biker, to be doing the Whiskey Chaser, but that was 2006, 7 or 7, 8. But all these years later, got hooked up with some guys, and the Whiskey Chasers is what we want to do, and that would be amazing. Because, and my co-presenter is, I don't know if anyone's aware, because it's back in the day, same age as me, it's the Doc from Doctor and the Medics. Oh, when I die in the name to rest, to the place. That's him, who's great at getting like a house on fire with Clive, and he's bloody 6 foot on the rest.
So you still got the same hairstyle?
Yeah. So, well, not so much up, but it's all out, and he's got his full length leather coats and the skulls, and it's like bloody, he looks like he was born on a trike. So he's got the trike, I've got my trike. The Whiskey Chasers, and working with a great co-producer called Darren Edwards. And so we've been to Adgefferin in Northumberland, been to Pendrain in Wales, gathering stuff and such. Because I'm a founder member at Adgefferin. Corin Kin, Joseph.
So are we.
So, no way.
We are.
Fantastic. Oh, what number did you get?
We picked our year when we were established
cool.
too. Yeah, so we're 2011.
Yeah. I didn't get I wanted, 666 and all that stuff, but I got 34. So, we are just about to be releasing our crowdfunder, the video to get crowdfunding to do our first pilot. So it's hard to break in and get commissioned. So this is what, stuff that, what's it, feel less, do more, do it yourself. Yeah. So that's what we're doing.
So what will it be? What will the Whiskey Chasers, what is that?
Oh, well, we'll be romping around the country on our trikes. So it'll be, historical, social, financial, celebrational, all those different aspects of whiskey across the years. So it'll be whiskey in battle, buying a cask, whiskey-flavoured condoms. It'll be everything you can think of. But really, it'll be about, it's a voyage or a trip of, it's adventure, discovery, and friendship. And that's because that's what whiskey's all about.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do.
So is this for TV or film?
I think it'll be more targeted social media initially, but the idea is, whatever it's TV, Netflix, so to get that series. Yeah. And then once that happens, we can do other things. We can do trikers, we can do vodka, we can do, and we do want to get to America, because they've got something called a tower trike there, which is like a conversion. It looks the size of an articulated lorry cab, and we want to get out there and get into some whiskey, some Southern American whiskies, and get Kentucky stuff, and get into the trikes. So that's what excites me. That's far more, and I'd rather do that. That's more fun, over the hill with a camera crew, that type of thing. So we will be trying to get that off the ground, and that won't be long.
And you're crowdfunding for that?
Yeah, crowdfund. We're gonna, may as well say. So I think what we'll be looking for is about 20k for that. But that's not work. That's fun. But if it does get set up and then it rolls on, that's something that will give me an income stream when I stop. But I'm never going to stop.
I was going to say, that's
Never.
probably a good place for us to stop, because I don't think you ever will stop. And,
What, talking?
Doing more. This is fear less, do more.
Yeah.
I think the fear stuff you've got well under control. The doing more, I think you'll just continue on. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where that takes you. And I'm very, very pleased that John Holmes decided that we should have a chat.
He's trouble, that guy.
But thanks, David, for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Fear Less, Do More, brought to you by Square One Law. If you found today's conversation inspiring or interesting, we've added a recommendation for what to listen to next. That's either on the screen now or in the show notes. Take care, and we'll see you next time.